This morning I am continuing and concluding our thinking together about St. Augustine, the architect of a new faith, as a part in our series on the inward journey. These words which I shall read come from Augustine's Confession. The mind commands the mind, its own self, to will, and yet it doth not. Whence this monstrousness, and to what end? Were the will entire, it would not even command it to be, because it would already be. Thus soul-sick was I, and tormented, accusing myself much more severely than my custom, rolling and turning me in my chain till that they were broken, whereby I now was but still was held. The very toys of toys and vanities of vanities still held me. They plucked my fleshly garment and whispered softly to me, "Dost thou cast us off? And from that moment shall we no more be with thee forever? And from that moment shall not this or that be lawful for thee to do forever?" But now they spake very faintly. For on that side whither I had set my face and whither I trembled to go, there appeared unto me the chaste dignity of continency, serene yet not relaxedly gay, honestly alluring me to come and doubt not, and stretching forth to receive and embrace me, her holy hands full of multitudes of good examples. So was I speaking, a deep consideration had from the secret bottom of my soul drawn together and heaped up all my misery in the sight of my heart. And there arose a mighty storm, bringing a mighty shower of tears. And I heard from a neighboring house a voice, as of a boy or girl, I know not, chanting and oft repeating, "Take up and read, take up and read." Instantly my countenance altered. I began to think most intently whether children were wont in any kind of play to sing such words, nor could I remember ever to have heard the like of such words. So, checking the torrent of my tears, I arose, interpreting it to be no other than a command from God to open the book and read the first chapter I should find. For I had heard of Antony, that coming in during the reading of the gospel, he received the admonition as if what was being read was spoken to him. "Go, sell all that thou hast, and give to the poor, and thou shalt have treasure in heaven, and come and follow me." And by such oracle, Antony was forthwith converted unto thee. Eagerly then I returned to the place where Alypius was sitting, for there I had laid the volume of the apostle when I arose thence. I seized, opened, and in silence read that section on which my eyes first fell. Not in rioting and drunkenness, not in chambering and wantonness, not in strife and envying, but put ye on the Lord Jesus Christ, and make not provision for the flesh. No further would I read, nor needed I. For instantly at the end of this sentence, by a light, as it were, of serenity infused into my heart, all the darkness of my doubt vanished away. The note upon which much of our thinking last Sunday rested had to do with the integrity of the religious experience of Augustine and how he felt that what he had experienced was so fundamental to the nature of the way God works with man, that he projected this insight, as it were, into a generalization about what would be the definitive way by which the whole world would enter into the newness of life, and particularly the process by which the ruined and collapsing empire might be renewed, reordered, reborn into what subsequently Augustine called the city of God. Now I want to back up and take a hard look at what was the dynamic element and the transcendent element in the experience of Augustine with his God, on the basis of which he, with the most amazing and one of the most creative minds in human history, established the foundations along which for at least 1,000 years the Roman Catholic Church would be building. We begin then with the fact that Augustine was wrestling with the problem of the two wills. I think that's a good place at which to begin. He was convinced that because of his inability by any act of will or personal discipline on his part to reduce to manageable units of control the unrestrained physical appetites of his body, that this inability for his will to be effective in bringing about a change in the behavior pattern of his life caused him to feel that this will, which was impotent even when there was the desire to change, was due to a corruption that was not inherent primarily in Augustine's will as Augustine's will, but it was a corruption inherent in the human will itself, based upon the sin of Adam. For when Adam willed on his behalf rather than God's, and in this act, according to Augustine's interpretation, rebelled against God, this corrupted the will of mankind, so that sin and in Augustine's terms, the reason why he could not he could not break away from the terrible impulses of his nature that made a slave of him. The reason why he could not do anything with this was the fact that his will itself was diseased. And therefore he was impotent. Now that's one of the wills. There was another will at work that he called the momentous will. This was the will of God, which had to be obeyed, to which the private will, before which the private will had to bow. But the private will could not bow before the will of God and become obedient to it of itself. Therefore, before I could give up my will to God's will, God will have to put something in my will that would make my will willing to bow before his will. In other words, only by the grace of God that would touch my will so that I will want to do it. Now, therefore, only by the grace of God, then, is man saved. And when Augustine realized in himself this kind of salvation, with his creative imagination, he said, as I was, the whole collapsing empire is. There is no thing at work within the empire that can save it. Only some external sovereign power that transcends all earthly and temporal powers, before which all of the kings and the nobles, before which the soldiers and the laymen and the priests of the church, before which all creation must bow. Only some sovereign power like this, that provides a point of redemptive referral that transcends the struggle, that is beyond the struggle, but is in some sense involved in the struggle. Only before that kind of power will there be any salvation for the individual or for the empire. So the foundations for this he found in the Roman Catholic Church. And he imputed to this church, through the interpretation of his religious experience primarily, all of what he himself had experienced in God. So, he says, that my will was touched by the grace of God. My will, therefore, for its redemption is dependent upon the act of the grace of God. And the grace of God does not operate in a vacuum. The grace of God operates through Christ in the church which he established, and therefore the church is the custodian of the grace of God. It is the dispenser, therefore, of salvation, and those who are not touched by this act of grace on the part of the church cannot hope even to desire salvation. So outside then of the representative of God, the church, there can be no salvation for the individual. And it is amazing, isn't it, how this doctrine has persisted in some of its manifestations down to latest times. It was this doctrine that was not rooted in Jesus Christ. It was this doctrine that caused the minister of our little church in my hometown, when my father died, my father who was not a member of a church, it was this doctrine that caused him to say to my mother that he could not be buried from the church because he died out of the church, because he died out of Christ. That there was no way by which he could get into the kingdom except in this way. Now, this is Augustine, the theologian. But what about Augustine, the man, the experiencer of salvation? Here we come upon something that never ceases to fascinate and excite my mind and imagination. Because all along, as you read the confessions, you see two streams moving side by side. For instance, he says, I tremble and I burn. I tremble when I feel that I am not like God. I burn when I feel that I am like God. Or in that great organ note with which the confessions open, Thou hast made us for thyself, and our souls are restless till they find their rest in thee, or our hearts are restless till they find their rest in thee. This dilemma, which is always present, isn't it? Something in me which says that there is an integrity that is native to my spirit, that there is an indigenous goodness that belongs to my life as an expression of the life of God. And there is in me also the clear-orbed manifestation of the corrupt impulse, the evil, not merely the evil deed, but the evil intent. And if in experiencing the latter, out of the desperation of the Spirit, man reaches hungrily in any direction for some other than self-reference, in the light of which he may be able to experience a correction, not merely in terms of decision to change this or that particular, but in the sense of a complete inner orientation and rebirth of the personality. Now, this came to a climactic moment in the life of Augustine, when, in the great controversy that I shall just touch because of its bearing on the point, that he had with Pelagius. Pelagius was this sensitive British monk in whom there was no violence. He was one of these human beings concerning whom it could be said that he would not knowingly harm anything or anybody. And for him, the will of man was good. He did not need any external, socially dependent frame of reference in order to give redemptive character to the will. It was intrinsically, positively moving in response to something that was built in the will that was of God. And Augustine, out of his kind of experience, knew that in and of his will, he had not been able to do anything. And what he imputed for himself, what he discovered for himself, he imputed into the life all around him. And so the issue was drawn then between these two men, and Augustine won. For more than 1,000 years. Now today, we are not as sure as Augustine was. But you can see the historical necessity out of which he had to act. And here he split again, you see. For he knew that all the time there was something in him that had not been touched by evil. At the same time, he knew that there were great levels in him that were corrupt. And he wanted to find something that was capable of giving to him a sense of inner integration and togetherness. And what he felt for himself, he knew that the collapsing, ruined empire would have to experience. So in his city of God, then, to take the place of the city of this world, the empire, he projected a church that would provide a point of referral for all of the barbarians, all of the corrupt politicians, all of the priests, all of the laymen, some socially dependent criterion that would take away from the individual the absolute responsibility for his own life. And this is what we are trying to find all the time, isn't it? I want my own independent mind. I want to experience again and again through all the levels of my being the integrity of my own will. And at the same time, I want something that can protect me from self-deception, something that will let me know by an other than self-reference when I am out of line. I want to be free to salute my own integrity. I want to be safeguarded against being destroyed by the integrity of my own will. This is the dilemma. And whether or not we find the answer in terms that Augustine found it, in the external authority of a church, that socially dependent organization that had within its confines all of the mandate of God for his creation, or whether we find it at some other point, the important thing is that I can't stand being solely dependent upon myself. And I can't stand not being dependent upon myself. So my growth oscillates between these two. The last line in the scripture lesson that just below where President Case stopped reading. Oh, the apostle says, only let your feet be guided, your steps be guided by such light as you have already. There's this, that all the light that shines does not shine unless it shines on my path. But all the light there is not on my path. And how to walk in my light, how to honor the light that is in me, and at the same time to put that light in a larger radiance. This is the act of greatest discipline and greatest faith. Where do you turn? For your point of referral beyond all that you know and experience. Where? We may not find the solution as simple as Augustine's, and as complex as this was. Authority, so that I'll always know when I'm lost. I can always check back, get my bearing, and go on again, knowing then that the mistake that I make can only be made if I misread the sign. But the mistake cannot be an absolute one, because all the freedom, as he's felt, is the freedom in obeying the will. Absolutely. And this is the great need of modern man, isn't it? To find some socially dependent point of referral that will give, as you check back and forth, increasingly creative meaning to the living of your life, even under the most cruel vicissitudes of your collective or private fortune. And whoever thinks he's found this knows that he's saved and he can stand anything that life can do to him. And he who has not found it is always looking, and will look as long as he lives. What is for you the point of referral? Forgive us, our Father, for all the failure of the mind and the spirit in following the light that is available within us. Teach us, O God, how we may be so true to what illumines our path, that we may be brought surely to the source of all light. This is our hope, this is our desperation, our Father, and this is our faith. Oh God, God our Father.